Hello. So I know I said that I thought it would be Tuesday before I got back to this, but well, frankly, I wanted to do some more work on it, and it's sort of my hope that I'm going to record the whole process. So I'm going to have a little bit of an early stream, and if there's people in the chat, then it'll be a stream, and if there's not, it'll just be a VOD. So just to very quickly summarize what we did in the last stream, we talked about what our goals are for an Altoon. Uh, we established the kind of the basic parameters of the instrument using so getting the taper and truncation from this spreadsheet that you can download in the link in the description. Um, all it does is it takes the relationship between the bassoon and contrabassoon and scales that according to the transposition you want and applies that to the hypothetical new instrument. In this case, an octave higher, so a transposition of 12, and we get the taper and truncation that I'm going to be using. Then we took the length and tone holes from this spreadsheet here. I did get a comment on the last video asking for more detail on what actually is going on this spreadsheet. What's going on this spreadsheet is more than enough for a multi-part series. It would take up the whole stream. But for the time being, I'm just taking the values that I used for the sopranoon and scale, because I'm pretty happy with the tuning on that, and scaling it by the for the lower pitched instrument. And then we started modeling. So this is what we have so far. We have the body and bore of the instrument, or we have the bore of the instrument modeled with the first 8 tone holes that are on the descending portion. So what will become the wing joint and half of the boot joint. And we also have the kind of a rough estimate of the outer body of the instrument, although this is going to be changed a little bit because we're going to be turning this into a real boot joint. So on the sopranoon, I modeled it all in one section. So this is all one piece. For the Altoon, I want to stay a little closer to bassoon form factor. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to have at least 3 segments: the boot joint, the wing joint, and the long joint. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to make a separate bell. So on the bassoon, the long joint and the bell are 2 different joints, mainly because it's too long. It would be too long to conveniently manufacture otherwise. For pedagogical instruments, which is what the Altoon is mainly used for now, it makes sense to have a separate bell joint because if, as anyone who's taught young people bassoon lessons, putting the instrument together is a non-trivial part of learning how to play bassoon, at least at the beginning. So you do want that extra bell joint just so you can teach the kids how to put the instrument together. I'm not so sure that it's necessary on an Altoon. It might come down to where the tenon lines up. If there's a really convenient place to put the tenon, I might go ahead and add the separate bell joint. But right now I'm leaning towards just making the long joint and the bell joint one piece. So right now, all of these tone holes are separate solids. And the main reason for that is because I want to be able to individually move these tone holes. Specifically, I want to be able to rotate these tone holes because some of them are going to be angled. Um, on the bassoon, the tone holes that are directly covered by the fingers are going to be angled to be able to be played more easily. The tone holes that are not directly played by the finger, there's usually no benefit to angling the tone hole, but just because it's easier to go ahead and model the instrument such that I have that flexibility rather than having to go in after the fact and add it in if for some reason I were to decide, well, for an example, right now I'm planning on the low D tone hole, the tone hole that would be covered by the low C key, to be an actual key. Rather than on the sopranoon, it's a thumb hole. But if I change my mind, I'm going to need to angle that hole so it comes in at exactly the right spot to be played by the thumb. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the sketch. I should say I did change one tiny thing from yesterday. Before, I had these tone holes coming down. I just flipped it around so the tone holes are coming up by default. On the bassoon, there's a lot more of these tone holes that are going to be coming up rather than down. And specifically, the more complicated tone holes are going to be coming up. Okay, so open up that sketch again, and I'm going to hide all the solid bodies because I don't need them. And open up, edit the sketch where we defined our tone holes. And I'm going to define I'm going to draw some lines that will define the axes on which these tone holes will rotate. So, real quick, I'm just going to draw this line to represent the outer bore of the instrument. Length, and then set this. Okay, so this is the outer bore. So if this is the outer bore of the instrument, if we were to rotate this tone hole, we wouldn't want to do it from the center line because that would change the position at which the tone hole enters the bore. Instead, we're going to rotate it around this point right here, the center of that circle, so that when we rotate the tone hole, it doesn't have a huge impact on where the tone hole enters the bore. We want the rotation to be as intonation neutral as possible. Now, the rotation will have other consequences that could impact intonation. For example, when you angle a tone hole, you're essentially increasing the cross-sectional area of that tone hole when it enters the bore because it's no longer a circle, it's an ellipse. But we want to limit that as much as possible. So I've drawn these lines here. These lines are going to represent, this is just all this is going to be is to help me define rotation axes. So I'm going to turn all of these lines into construction lines. That way it cannot possibly mess up these profiles that are also in this sketch that are being used to define or create the tone holes. Okay. Next, well, I'm going to go ahead and set the length of these lines equal to that tone hole's position times the taper. So essentially, once I make that line collinear with the center axis of the tone hole, I have a point that will define where that tone hole will actually enter the bore, and that's where I'm going to rotate the line by. So tone hole 01 position times taper. So once again, because we're using taper instead of angle, we can multiply any position by the taper to get the local bore radius at that point. Gets rid of a lot of trigonometry or projection of solids, projection of sketches. I mean, the inventor's capability to project or to use like a cross section of a solid in another sketch is really useful at times, but when you're designing something specifically to be flexible, it a lot of times causes more trouble than it solves, which is why I'm defining this length numerically rather than doing something that might seem more clever, like projecting a sketch from one of my other solids. And it's possible that I am just being paranoid, but I have had this go wrong a lot. Okay, so I have all these lengths set. Now I'm gonna add a coincident constraint from the end of this line to the center axis of each tone hole. I could also have put a collinear constraint on these lines. It's the same thing. Okay, so now I have the point at which I'm going to rotate all these tone holes. One other thing I'm going to do is create another line at an angle to that point to represent the... So even though this is not where... I'm not going to use this sketch to actually rotate the tone holes, I am going to well, it might be easier just to show you. So Mark, right now, Mark just asked what part I'm designing. Right now, I'm still working on the descending tone holes. So these are the tone holes in the wing joint and the first half of the boot joint. And all of these lines, I'm going to set the length to the tone hole length. And that's because, okay, hold on. I'm gonna finish setting all these lengths. Okay. So I have all of those set to the length that I want. These are the lengths that I figured acoustically. So aiming towards intonation. And next, finally, I'm going to set all of these to the angle that I want for that tone hole. Plus 90 degrees. The reason why I'm adding 90 degrees to all of these is because I want to be able to define each tone hole, the angle of each tone hole relative to its perpendicular state. So if it's 0 degrees, I want it pointed straight up, not inside the bore. So some of these are negative, meaning that it's going to be angled up towards the top of the instrument. Some of them are positive, meaning angled down towards the end of the instrument. But since these dimensions are scalar rather than vector, Inventor doesn't know what to do with negative angles or negative dimensions. Okay, tone hole 01 angle, that's what happens when I don't add 90. So Mark asks, how would an Altoon work in an orchestral concert band environment? I'm not even remotely convinced that an Altoon would really be useful in such an environment. You already have oboes and English horns, and the bassoon, like orchestral bassoonists, they're already capable of playing throughout most of the range that it would be reasonable to expect an Altoon to be able to play. Where I do think the Altoon could have some potential, emphasis on potential, nothing certain, is, like in a bassoon ensemble, a bassoon-only setting, or potentially even like a double reed-only setting. Something where there's more room for nuanced, small timbral nuances, and there might be an advantage to having an instrument in a bassoon form factor beyond simply what it sounds like. But I'd be happy to be proven wrong. Not every instrument has to be useful in the orchestra to be useful to exist. And 90 plus tone hole 08 angle. Yeah. Okay. So so I've done all of this to define these lines, and these lines that I've just created are going to represent the where the tone hole exits the body of the instrument, because this is the point where I'm going to draw the facing of the tone hole. So any tone hole that has a pad needs to be faced so that the pad has a flat surface on a narrow flat surface on which to contact. So all of these lines are going to be helping me define where that facing is. It would be easier if I could just model the facing into this tone hole solid, and then I could just do one solid. However, the facing needs to be perpendicular to the body of the instrument, not not angled at a tone hole, not at the same angle the tone hole's angled at. So since I'm going to be angling some of these solids, I need the facing to be completely separate. Okay, one other small thing I'm going to do on this sketch is I know that the C-sharp tone hole is going to have a riser because, the C-sharp tone hole is typically elongated for a couple of reasons. First of all, usually by elongating this tone hole, you're able to move it higher on the bore of the instrument, which means it's not in the tenon, it's not on the boot joint tenon. And you could also argue that it helps the C-sharp balance tonally with the other tone holes, which are through the thicker portion of the wing joint. But for now, we know that we're going to need a riser, and I'm going to set the... So I'm going to create this little rectangle here to serve as my riser, and set the thickness to... riser, which is a parameter that I have already set in when I set my parameters. And now I just need to add some coincident constraints. And so we have our risers and we have our facings, the points that we're going to use for the facings. Okay. So let's hide that again. So I'm going to create, I have all these points, and I'm going to use those to create axes. And I'm going to do that by making my YZ plane visible. So this is the plane on which I drew these sketches. And under these work features, if I hit this drop down menu next to axis, there's an option for creating an axis normal to a plane through a point. So if I click that plane and that point, I'll have the rotation axis that I want. Okay. So Mark asks, are the ratios of the normal bassoon resized half or a third of the size to make this Altoon? It depends on what you mean by ratios. I mean, very generally, yes. So, however, there's a lot of extra complications that make that relationship. I guess what I would say is the acoustic lengths of the Altoon are, in fact, half of the acoustic lengths of the bassoon. However, the physical lengths are not generally half because they are related in various non-linear ways. So like even the overall length of the instrument isn't going to be exactly half because we have a different truncation amount, and we have a different the different bore radius means that there's a different a different end correction. Okay, so next I'm going to rotate a new solid for the riser, the C-sharp riser. And I'm going to name that riser 04. Now, okay. So now I can set about rotating these tone holes in the degree that I want them. So let's do the descending bore. So there's underneath the modify ribbon, there's a move bodies option. So select one of the tone holes and then select the option for rotate about line. Then I just click the line, and for the angle, I want tone hole 0, 0 angle, and make sure that it's going in the right direction. So now that the left-hand first finger tone hole is angled in the direction we want, so we just do that for all of the other tone holes. Or all of the other tone holes that we have defined so far. Because there's going to be, of course, there's more tone holes on the other half of the instrument. Something went wrong there. Need to fix that. The riser, I think I rotated it around the wrong axis. I thought I'd... Okay. I'm going to move on to do these others and fix that real quick. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why they make the move bodies. I don't know why they make the move bodies. Seems like it's an awkward menu to use. Like you have to click this little drag down box, and seems like they could just have it as 3 buttons. It'd make it a lot more a lot easier to use. Okay, so let's go about fixing some of these problems that arose. So this one, I forgot to flip the axis on. And the revolution okay. Yeah. Okay, so I did select the wrong axis on the revolution for the wait. Oh. Okay. I put it on the wrong side. So just expected. Okay. Now the riser is in the right spot. It's going to throw up an error because I deleted the profile that I was using in this feature. But now all should be right. Okay. Why? Okay. Sorry about this. Okay. Had the wrong axis. Forgot to redo the axis when I... Okay. So now we have the tone holes. And I thought I checked this and that you could... Hold on, I'm going to try something. So it's throwing up an error when I try to rotate one of these solids by 0 degrees. And I didn't think it would do that. So I want to see... I'm going to temporarily change that to -10. Move bodies. All right, TO for angle, flip it, apply. Okay. So I thought so if I change this to 0, it's probably going to throw up an error now, isn't it? No. It works just fine. So apparently it won't let me rotate something by 0, but I can it won't let me rotate something by 0 when I initially create the feature, but it will let me rotate it by 0 after the fact. Well, that's annoying. Okay, I'm just going to set all of these to -1 for now, and then come back and set them to 0 later. That's strange and annoying. Okay. Okay. So now the only thing that two things haven't been rotated yet. It's the C# riser and the B-flat tone hole. 07 angle. Okay. So now we have all of our tone holes and risers that we're going to need. So next up, I'm going to sketch the facings for all of these tone holes. Most of them aren't actually going to have facings, but so I'm going to create a new sketch on the YZ plane. Let's hide all of these. And onto that sketch, I'm going to project the end point of these lines. So Brett asks, why do a C# riser? Will I be doing multiple joints? I do think I'm going to be doing multiple joints. I don't know for a fact that it will need a C# riser, but I want to have one programmed in at this point under the assumption that I will. I can always suppress that feature if I end up not needing it. But for now, I'm going to assume that I'll be using it. Okay, so now that I've taken all of these points, the endpoints of these lines, I've projected them into my new sketch, and then I can get rid of my old sketch because I don't need it anymore. And these points are going to represent the facings. I know that I'm not going to have a facing for the first 3 tone holes. These are the left-hand finger tone holes. So I'm going to start here and draw this bizarre shape that might become clear over time. Put a vertical constraint there, perpendicular there, perpendicular there, and perpendicular there. So this is the solid that I'm going to rotate to produce the facing of the tone hole. This distance is going to be the radius of the tone hole plus some small thickness for the rim. You want the area of contact between the pad and the body of the instrument to be small, but not a knife's edge. So I've already established a rim of 0.5 millimeters, and I've set that as a parameter. I also want to know this facing angle, which I have set to 8 degrees. And for this distance, this needs to be, the facing needs to be at least as wide as the pad. So I have the tone hole 04 pad radius, and then I'm going to add to that 2 millimeters for extra clearance. And I've also programmed that in as a separate parameter called pad clear. That way, if I decide to make that smaller or larger later on, I can do so easily. Okay, so if we rotate that around the axis, we should get a facing. So for example, here this solid is going to the facing solid is going to intersect the tone hole, or the riser, rather than the body of the instrument. So it would actually be applied to this. I didn't make this long enough. Let's just make that taper times length times 3, just to make sure it's plenty long enough, so that eventually when I go through and subtract these, I get the nice pad facing that I want. Let's see, where is... Yeah, so I'll get that facing angle with the rim, and importantly, independent of any rotation of the tone hole. Okay, so delete that, and I'm going to do the same thing I just did. For the other tone holes that I know will have a riser, or sorry, the other tone holes that I know will have a facing. Now I'm also going to draw this little extra wedge over here. And this is because this is when you're 3D printing, it helps to have this little extra relief here so that these tone holes aren't perfectly perpendicular. The facing of these tone holes isn't a perfect counterbore, it's an angled counterbore. That way you know you're not going to have any overhang issues. Okay, so I don't know, I'll just set that by... The exact dimensions here and here don't really matter because these are negative. These are solids that are just going to be used to remove material from other solids. Okay, so here's our basic tone hole facing, and I can copy that and paste it over to the other place that I know I'm going to need it, which is the B flat tone hole. And I just need to go in and change these parameters from the copied parameters to the parameters for that tone hole. So the 7th tone hole's radius plus the rim, and go ahead and set that to face. And this one to 7th tone hole's pad plus pad clearance. And actually, I forgot, I have a parameter set for my relief angle, which is what I call that the angle that I use to prevent overhangs in 3D printing. I call it the relief. Okay. So now we have all of that, and I'll just so I'm going to revolve this, apply, and I'm also going to revolve the relief as a separate solid. The reason why is because sometimes you only really need the relief in one direction. Usually I find it easier just to model the relief all the way around, but sometimes it's convenient to only model it on the side you need it. And by having it as a separate solid, it allows me to uh, modify it separately if I need to. So I'm just going to name these real quick. Okay, so, and I'll real quick show you what that looks like. So we have our descend bore and our descend body. We are going to combine the facing, the relief, and the tone hole for the 7th tone hole into the bore. So combine all of that together and then subtract from that. So now we end up with the tone hole shape I want, with the facing, with the relief. Everything is ready to go. And once again, because I've defined everything in the complicated, unintuitive way that I have, it's fairly straightforward to change anything if I want to. I could, for example, if I were printing this in PLA, I might decide that I can deal with much smaller relief, maybe only 15 degrees. And I can change that, and it's going to change that relief on every tone hole. If I decide that I want a more shallow facing angle, I can change that to 4 degrees. If I decide I want a wider rim, I can change that. And that is going to automatically apply that change to every tone hole that I have done in that manner. Okay. But I'm not going to do any of that merging and cutting just yet. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and get to work. So I have right now, in this kind of complicated mess, I have all of the tone holes, all of the tone hole solids that I'm going to use in generally the right spot. There's one more thing, one more variable that I'm going to need to set, and right now I have them all set to 0, but apparently because of that problem we just discussed, I'm going to have to set them to -1 and then set them to 0 after the fact. Because for some reason it won't let me rotate something by 0 degrees. Okay. And that, so the final degree of motion we want to have on these tone holes is the angular position of the tone hole, or the one way to think about it would be the roll of the tone hole. So whether it comes out the top, the side, the bottom at a 10-degree angle. And for that, we are not going to use these axes that we already defined. We are going to use the origin axis, our z-axis. And we're going to do the same thing. So go in to our Move Bodies panel, rotate about line, click on each solid. Instead of tone hole 0, 0 angle, I'm going to do tone hole 0, 0 roll, which I have also defined. And it doesn't really matter which direction it goes as long as I use the same one. So actually, I'm just going to make sure to use whichever one it defaults to. Okay, apply that. And this is going to be another moment where it's just typing in stuff for a little bit. So if you have any questions, now might be a good time. And so for the tone holes with multiple components, actually here, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I want to go ahead and merge the, so for example, on the C sharp tone hole, I know I'm going to have a there's going to be a facing. So I'm going to go ahead and merge the tone hole to its facing now, so that I only have to rotate it once. Unfortunately, I can't merge the Unfortunately, I can't merge the riser to the tone hole, because the riser and the tone hole are going to be used in different ways. The riser is going to be an addition to the body of the instrument. The tone hole is going to be a subtraction from it. So I will need to rotate the riser and the riser and the tone hole separately. Okay. I got an applause. I don't know. Oh, that's not an applause. That's a wave. Hello, Thomas. Tomas. I actually don't know which one it is. If it's Thomas or Tomas. Okay, sorry. Got, okay. So, tone hole 04. There we go. Thomas, okay. Okay. And I actually forgot there's one more thing I want to do. Right now, I'm operating under the assumption that I can make the right hand third finger work as a tone hole. On bassoon and tenorune, the distance is too great and it needs to be a pad. However, I am going to go ahead and include a facing. Yeah, I am going to go ahead and include a facing for that tone hole, in case I end up needing to use it, in case it needs to have a pad. And I just realized there's going to be an additional complication there. Okay, tone hole 06 roll. tone hole 08. Okay. So now I have all of the descending tone holes and the all of the flexibility I need to eventually move them in the right position. Right now, they are not in a sensible position. For example, the C sharp would be on the back of the instrument. The B flat is also going to be on the back of the instrument. And these right-hand tone holes are probably going to be angled towards the middle of the boot joint just to make things a little more ergonomic. So we're going to go backwards a bit. Moving my end of part marker earlier so that I can create that new facing that I wanted. Xander, you had to go mention pizza. Now I'm hungry. Okay. So the complication okay, it's a bit of a cheat. So normally tone holes, there would be enough distance between the tone holes that you don't have to worry about the profiles intersecting. But these two tone holes are very close. I'm going to have the tone hole coming from the other direction so they don't intersect. I don't know how stable that's going to be though if, for example, I end up needing to change these tone holes drastically. Brett, glad you were able to drop by for at least a little bit. Talk to you later. Relief. And then this distance is going to be tone hole 08 pad plus Y. Oh, I know what it is. I didn't think that I would be using a pad for this, so I actually didn't define a parameter for a pad parameter for tone hole 8. So I need to add a new one. And I'm going to set that to, I'll just leave it as 1 for now. So now I have the right there. Actually, no. I can't set it to 1. Okay. Set this first. And then okay, there we go. And then let's delete those and use some equals constraints instead so it doesn't end up adding a whole bunch of reference diameters, or sorry, reference dimensions. Okay. There we go. So now I have a relief and a facing for that 8th tone hole that I'm probably not going to use, but if I do end up needing to use, it's better that I have it now. And I need to combine tone hole 8 with its facing and relief before I rotate it, so I don't have to rotate it again. Okay. So it looks messy right now because all of these tone holes that are going to be holes eventually are these weird awkward solids that are sticking out at weird angles. But that is pretty much everything I need to eventually get these tone holes in the right position. Okay, so I'm going to save that, hide these extra sketches, and then set about creating the tone holes for the ascending portion of the bore. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hide all of these tone holes, and I'm going to make visible the centerline axis of this bore and the plane for this bore. And then let's just hide all the bodies and start this new sketch. So here I have a bit of a conundrum because, well, if we go back to the sketch that I defined from the tone holes, the sketch that I used to define the other tone holes, I had at an origin the I had it starting from the origin, which is also the distance at which I have set all of these, or defined all of these tone holes as being the distance from the origin, or the hypothetical point of that cone. But I can't use that dimension here, or I can't use the origin point here because it would be going in the wrong direction. So what I'm going to need to do instead is I'm going to put a line over on this side, and let's just make it a construction line. And I'm going to set this distance as the length. So essentially this is going to be a mirrored version of the origin that I can use to define the tone holes on this side of the instrument, but being able to use the same method I used for the other tone holes. So I need A flat, G, F sharp, F, E, E flat, D, C sharp, C, and B. We don't need a tone hole for low B flat because that's the bell of the instrument. Okay. I've already used these, so I can hide them just to make things a little less messy. And this is going to be another exciting game of drawing rectangles. So right now I'm just creating perpendicular constraints. So these tone holes are actually cylinders instead of somehow becoming a 0.1 degree taper or something. Always a good idea to keep everything fully constrained. And then finally, the top of the cylinders. Well, that tone hole got wild. And then a collinear constraint at the top, just so they're all the same distance and I don't have to manually create a dimension for each one. Okay. Okay. So we have our rectangles. Actually, just stole a dimension from another sketch. Okay. What do I need to do next? Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is set the radius of all of these. As I learned last time, if I try to set the position first, it moves. The lines get tangled up because it only moves one line and not the other line. Low E flat, low D, low C sharp, low C, and low B. Okay, so now I just need to remember, yes, okay. Set the positions, and I'm going to be, instead of setting the position from the origin, I'm going to set the position from this mirrored version of the origin I've created. So this is tone hole 09, not poise, but position. That already something seems wrong. But I'm going to go ahead and enter these values real quick, get the boring stuff out of the way. T16 position. T17 position. And I got off by 1, didn't I? Yes. And then okay. Okay. Never mind. It looks okay. For I forgot that this line was just an axis, not the actual length of the instrument. So I thought that the low A flat tone hole looked way too far away from the U bend. Okay. Okay, that all looks right. So now, I'm going to go back to that sketch. And I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other sketch to define the point or the origin point of the facing. See, Xander, if my microphone's picking that up, it's Xander's fault because he's the one who mentioned pizza, and now my stomach is making noises to indicate it wants pizza. The smart thing to do would have been to do both of these lines at the same time, because if you end one line, it automatically creates another line until you hit escape. I did not do that though, so I'm having to hit escape twice as often as I would have otherwise. Okay, so I'm going to select all these lines I just created, and since I'm not going to be making any profiles out of these lines, I'm going to set them all as construction lines. And this is, and now set the lengths to what I want. So this is tone hole 09 length, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and I'm doing all of these wrong. This should be the length. This should be the bore radius, which is equal to the position times the taper. Sorry about that. So right now, you're probably okay, so 12. Sorry, I'm gonna finish this up and then try to have a conversation. T-Dub, I am doing perfectly fine. Other than the aforementioned being hungry. T15 position times taper, T15 length. Now, people who have been subscribed to my channel for a while might remember when I did something tried to do what I was calling an un-o-matic stream, which is where I wanted to create a model of a bassoon that you could adjust for different transpositions, and everything would update automatically. This is sort of a spiritual successor to that idea. I'm doing a lot of extra work now so that eventually the model will be very flexible. This is useful for any prototype instrument where you're going to be moving tone holes, but the hope is that it might work for kind of larger deviations from the model. So that I might, for example, be able to take this same model, enter parameters for, let's say, a piccoloon, and get a nice, clean piccoloon model that's better than my current piccoloon model. Okay, and then this is tone hole 18 length. Okay. Why? Oh, once again, have to add 90. I'm just going to copy 90 plus. There we go. So that I can just do it like that. Okay, 14. 15. 16. 17, and 18. For those of you who didn't come to the last stream, although I expect that's precisely nobody at this point, these numbers are just the numbers, the same numbers as on the subcontrabassoon. So starting from 0, 0, which is the open F tone hole, the left-hand 1 tone hole, and going down. The subcontrabassoon actually has tone hole 19 because it goes to low A, so it does need a low B flat tone hole. And it also has a tone hole 20 that is the E F sharp trill tone hole, which I hadn't originally accounted for in the numbering scheme. Otherwise, I would have had that be 00, which would have made more sense, but by the time I decided that I was going to incorporate a low or an E F sharp trill key, I had already numbered everything and I wasn't going to redo it. Okay, so revolve all of these tone holes. And make certain not to accidentally click on this line here, this dotted line. Okay, so now we have all of those tone holes. So if we draw our... So now we have the tone holes going up from the bottom of the instrument. I'm still wondering if something isn't wrong. That this tone hole seems too close to the bell to me. Okay. I think it's right. Once again, streaming is forcing me to actually be responsible and name things. And this is probably going to be the most tiresome part, which is setting the rotation of all of these tone holes. And the reason it's going to be tiresome is because the plan is for none of them to be angled. But the minute I assume that and don't include that flexibility is when I'm going to decide that one of these tone holes does need to be angled. For example, maybe well, no, it wouldn't need to be angled for that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and angle all these tone holes, and then I'll probably be thinking about well, okay, so I'll do these tone holes and the facings for the tone holes and then call it a stream. So if anyone has any questions. Okay, so create an axis through that point and normal to that line. Okay. So I have all these rotation axes. Now, I can actually rotate him. I swear the hardest part of this is just keeping track mentally of which number I'm on. Okay, so 11. And then this is 12. This is 13. This is 14. $15. 16. 17. And finally 18. Okay, got all that. Now, I can hide all these solid bodies. And create a new sketch. Here, and project the endpoints of all these lines, so our face origins. Okay. So draw this weird looking shape. Then properly constrain everything. T09 radius plus rim. So our tone hole radius plus our rim. Our face angle. Our relief angle. Our pad plus pad clear. And then all we're missing is here. Okay. So now we have our pad facing. And just duplicate it. Okay, now just set these on the, what's going on here? So set these on our face origins. And now just redefine all these parameters. So I can delete all of those. Okay. You know, there's probably somewhere in the settings that I don't know a setting so that when you copy and paste a sketch that's dimensioned, it exactly copies that dimension rather than creating a new reference value or a new reference dimension. But I should look into that after the stream, because the idea that there is someone watching me copy and paste is a little bit odd. Okay. Okay, almost there. $11. 13. 15. 16. 17 and 18. Okay. There we go, finally. So revolve all of those. Now the reliefs. Now these are going to intersect, but because they are separate solids, the intersection does not matter. We can still move them independently. Okay. Next up, well, the exciting step of naming all of these. Face 9, face 10, face 11, relief 9, (13), 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay. So now we have added to this cacophony of shapes next. We're going to combine some of them before we rotate. Now, even though we're going to combine them, it's still handy that they're separate solids, because we can always suppress this combination if, for example, we decide that we don't need a relief on a certain tone hole. You know, it may be that a certain tone hole, there's so many keywork components nearby that it needs to be a true counterbore facing, even if that makes 3D printing it more awkward. Okay. Now, we're going to rotate all of these. $14. Okay. Save that. Now, this is actually a pretty exciting part. I'm going to combine all of the bores and tone holes together. So these are our negative bodies. Then combine our negative solids. Then combine our bodies and risers together. So that's all of our solid bodies, or our positive bodies. And now I can just subtract one from the other, and I get the exact opposite because I did them in the wrong order. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. So now we have all of these tone holes with proper facings, and everything's defined acoustically. When I, for example, set this length, the length of these tone holes, I can input the same values that I would calculate acoustically. Before, when I've done this, I've tried it several different ways, and I've had to do these weird conversions. Okay, so now, just real quick to finish up the stream, I'm going to go into my parameters, and I'm going to change my roll values for these tone holes to something sensible. So like right now, those look good, but the tone hole 04 needs to be on the back of the instrument. So I'm going to set that to 180 degrees, and we can see that that tone hole with its facing and has been moved to the back of the instrument. So these tone holes here, for now, let's just say I'm going to be rotating them um, 15 degrees inward. There we go. And right now these tone holes intersect, but I can solve that by rotating this B flat tone hole, let's say 120 degrees. So it's sort of on the back of the instrument, and actually it's probably going to need to be more than that. Maybe even all the way on the back. The position of the B flat tone hole, though, will kind of depend on how the keywork works out. But since I don't have, this isn't the final body shape of the boot joint, so I'm not going to get too married to any of these rotations just yet. Now, you might notice that the spacing on these tone holes and these tone holes looks inconsistent, and there is a reason for that. I factored in an extra thickness of the body here. When these, when the wing joint and boot joint are thickened by the degree I expect them to be, these tone holes will be equally spaced, or as equally spaced as possible. So these tone holes will be 25 millimeters apart, and over here we'll have 25 millimeters and 32 millimeters. Okay, so let's rotate our A flat tone hole. And let's say, for example, that's, nope, that is definitely not what I want. Negative 90. There we go. And this is probably going to also be on the backish of the instrument. So stick that down there for now. This is our low, the tone hole covered by the low F key. So this is probably going to be on the front of the instrument. And next up we have the low E tone hole. It's going to be roughly in the thumb position, so also on the back of the instrument. And I'm going to get to show off what I think is something really neat about the way that I've done this here in a second. All right, the E flat tone hole is probably going to be somewhere, let's just stick it there for now. D tone hole, wait. Oh, sorry, I got mixed up. Okay, yeah, sorry. D12 is the F sharp tone hole. Okay. Hold on a second. I'm gonna go backwards for a bit. So move the B flat tone hole, or the low B tone hole to the back. Move this somewhere around there. Move this there. No, this is going to be over there. Probably not exactly in line, but fairly close. This is going to be on the back. This is going to be our the tone hole covered by the low C key. And then this is going to be our low E flat tone hole, our low D tone hole, and our F sharp tone hole. Okay, so we can independently move all those, but it looks a little, well, it wouldn't be very convenient to hook up keywork to this right now. So for instance, we have our low F key way up here. Our low F key would have to cover this tone hole. And our low E so I have the bend position in a bad position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that variable, the bend position variable, and make the descending portion of the bore longer and the ascending portion shorter. And actually, hold on, I'm going to save this real quick. I'm going to do something fancy just to show off how neat the flexibility is. I'm going to add a slider. So I have a bend position. Right now it's 710. And I'm going to change this so it is a slider. And let's set the minimum value to, I don't know, 650, and the maximum value to 800, and hit OK. And if I have done everything correct, then moving this slider should not do what I expected. Oh, yes, it does. Wait. Wait a minute. No, in fact, I'm not so sure about that. Okay, so something complicated is not quite right. I'm going to reset that bend position parameter to 710. Okay. So eventually what I want to do is I'm going to move all of these ascending tone holes down as low as they can go towards the bottom of the instrument. And I'm going to do that by fixing whatever it is that's preventing that from happening now. So here is our sketch. Hold on, let's... So that's all right. And if I... So, sorry, this is going to be a little bit of me talking to myself for a while as I troubleshoot what exactly is going on. As I increase this dimension here, the bend position, okay. Okay. So I'm gonna, just to check myself for a second, the distance between the B flat, the end of the instrument, and the low B key should be 105.5 millimeters. So real quick, let's check if that's true, because I don't think it is. And I'm going to do some kind of messy projections here, but it's okay because I'm going to delete them. Yeah, 69.301. Okay, so what is the difference there? Minus 105.5. Okay, so it's about 36.2 millimeters off. Interesting. Alright, this is going to really bother me until I get this straightened out. So the problem has something to do with how I have defined this mirror. Okay. Okay, I think I figured it out. It has something to do with, I'm going to go ahead and move the end of part marker there. It has something to do with how I have defined this mirror version of the origin. Okay, get rid of all this stuff. I don't need to see you. Because right now, the way that I have defined it, it does not take into account the bend position. So I need to be more clever. Okay. So if I set that to bend position without Klingon spelling, and then set this okay. Okay, so let's check the distance between let's see if that's right now. So should be 105.5, 105.9. Okay, and that's because the slight distance difference is because of the angle. Because I still have that set to -1 degrees because it wouldn't let me. So I can. Okay. So now what happens if I move my bend position slider? What should happen is the descending tone holes stay the same place. The bottom of the instrument lowers, and the ascending tone holes move down. Ah, there we go. That's exactly what I wanted. So now I can move this as low as it will go, just for now. 726. Yeah. So now my low F tone hole, or sorry, the tone hole closed by the low F key is in a much more sensible position. So, for example, on the Tinneroon, you can see how the tone hole closed by the low F key is right about here. And you know, things have to, it's smaller, so it's going to be a little more compact. Good. And then our A flat tone hole is still on the instrument, which the bottom of the U bend, or the A flat key, is usually about as low on the boot joint as it can go. Then we have our okay. So right now, the only significant issue is I have the length of these tone holes set a little too high. So I want that facing to clearly encompass the entire tone hole. I mean, not a full circle. Let me bring up a good example. So this is a good example of this facing's long enough. All right, this facing is removing enough material so that the pad can seal fully against the bore. This one, for example, isn't. So, real quick, let's go in and I'm going to, all of these tone holes that I set to -1 angle, I'm going to go ahead and set those back to 0. Sorry, I know I'm going longer than I had intended, but okay. So, I know that I'm going to need to shorten the length of these tone holes. For example, let's just take this, the low B tone hole. Right now, it's set to 5.7. I'm probably going to need to set it to, I don't know, let's say 5.2. So, like right there, I have a much more sensible geometry. However, that because I'm shortening the tone hole, I have to shorten the, it's going to change the intonation. So for example, if I go over here to this tone hole that or the spreadsheet that I use to calculate the tone holes, if I change this 5.7 to 5.2, it's showing me that I have a 1.4 millimeter discrepancy between the acoustic length of this tone hole and what I want it to be. Which means I'm probably going to need, I'm going to need to change the position of the tone hole to compensate. In this case, moving it about moving it 1.5 millimeters further down the instrument. So I would need to go in and do this. But it also, well, here, give me a second. So I can change that position as soon as I find it. So 1.5 millimeters further up the bore, but that's also going to change the intonation of low C. And well, right now it says it's only going to change it, so it's going to change the acoustic length by 0.2 millimeters for low C, which is probably okay, but of course I'm going to have to shorten the length of low C as well, which, so long story short, what I'm going to need to do is go in, and so right now I have all of these set at like 5.7 by default. And change them all to 5.2, and I'll go ahead and shorten this one as well since it's likely to throw up an error. And then tweak the rest of the values to get rid of these discrepancies. Now, like a discrepancy of 0.2 is probably fine, so as close to possible, fix all of these discrepancies to bring the instrument back in tune with the reworked lengths for all of these, for all of the tone holes that were 5.7. So I'm not going to do that on stream because I don't think even the 5 people that remain are interested in watching me tweak values. And I should say that my hold on, sorry, let me, okay, yeah, so these all look much better. In fact, this one I'm probably gonna need to make even shorter. So this is a good example of why it's good to have extra flexibility in the model. Is I can do things like that, first of all, without breaking anything, but also without having to remember, okay, I defined that in this sketch here. So you have to dig through sketches to find the one that referenced the blah, 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 blah. Okay. But anyway, yeah. So right. Okay. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought for a second. Yes, 4.8. Okay. So what I would do, now that I know that I needed to change that aspect of the design, I would go back to the kind of the acoustic spreadsheet, because this model doesn't care anything about the acoustics of the instrument. And I would change these parameters slightly to bring things in tune. So, for example, make the instrument about 0.3 millimeters longer, which is probably not enough to actually make a difference, but I might as well, for the first prototype, start with the instrument as well in tune as I can possibly predict it. And then once I have a playable prototype, I can I won't need to worry so much about this step because I'll have actual results to compare against. And you'll notice that even though it says a 1.1 millimeter error in the acoustic length, that doesn't necessarily equate to a moving the tone hole 1 millimeter, because that, well, for one thing, that tone hole is going to affect other tone holes, but it can also be, the tone hole is also affected by the distance between tone holes. So if I move a tone hole down 1 millimeter, I'm also shortening the distance between that tone hole and the tone hole that follows it. So, for instance, here I'm 0.8 millimeters off. I might need to move that by 0.9, or actually one full millimeter, to counteract the shortening of the distance between tone holes. The F sharp tone hole is probably going to, yeah. And then here, I'm not going to do these tone holes on stream. So G, A, B, actually G's fine. I can go ahead and tweak G. Okay. And then A flat is fine as well. I can, okay, do that. And A, okay, luckily I didn't have any big tuning discrepancies that popped up on A, B flat, B, C, all of these tone holes, because these have more, I did some geometry off screen to try to get those tone holes at the right angle so that they're the right distance. Working with these tone holes, the main right and left finger tone holes, is a lot more complicated. But luckily, I didn't have to change any of those. So real quick, I'm going to move that over here and plug in my new values for the positions of these tone holes. Okay, so, okay, I'm going to have to move this off screen, but just know that I'm looking at the spreadsheet. Okay, so I didn't change any of those. So we had, well, first of all, I want to change the overall length of the instrument to 1425.6, which is a trivially small change. Probably making that making that change of 0.2 millimeters is probably below the reproducibility of the methods that I am using to make the instrument. But once again, might as well start from a secure starting position. And right now, I'm going to so right now I have immediate update turned on. And what that means is if I change this value, it makes that change immediately. I'm going to turn that off so that it doesn't try to compute all these changes all at once. So I can just enter these real quick. And then I'm going to do a manual force the update after they're all entered, just so I don't waste time waiting for it to update the model. 965.6, 924.7, 856.8, 819, 782.8, 673.2, 660, 627. Okay. So now I'm going to click update, and it moved all those tone holes, turn immediate update back on. So now to the degree that I can expect the instrument to be in tune, it's going to be in tune. there's going to be more fixing once I actually have a real instrument to play. Now, I didn't. It could be. So it just so happened that the only the only tone holes that I had to change were tone holes with pads, which meant that I could move the position freely without impacting the ergonomics of the instrument. But it could be that a tone hole that I can't move needs to be changed. And in this case, what I would have to do is work with the radius. So this spreadsheet also, if I change the radius, so instead of 2.2 or 2.1 millimeters, I say 4 millimeters, something crazy. It's telling me that now I have a discrepancy of 20.7 millimeters. Since this spreadsheet is agnostic to the exact tuning, it's just comparing it against the Sopranoon. It's that errors expressed in millimeters rather than like a frequency shift. Okay. Well, that's where we're going to stop for today. Sorry, we went a little bit long, but we have the tone holes roughly in the right spot. Everything's very flexible, so we can change things. One thing that we probably are going to have to really think about here, you might notice that. So on the boot joint of a bassoon, you would normally have from the right hand 1 tone hole all the way down to the low F tone hole. But importantly, you don't have the C sharp tone hole on the boot joint. Here, however, we do have the C sharp tone hole is below the low F tone hole. So if I were to divide the boot joint, I would have to decide, well, if I were to right now so unless we can kind of untangle some of these keys, we may have to put make this one-bodied. Or we might end up putting that one. The other option would be putting the C sharp tone hole on the boot joint. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to think hard or a little bit about what the best way to handle that is. There is another possibility, which is moving that bend position even further. So I can show you what that would look like. So that the low F key let's try 760 for demonstration. So with moving the tone hole that much, okay, so if I move the bend position that much, I get I get the boot joint a little straightened out. However, I no longer have an A-flat tone hole. The A-flat tone hole is now on the U-bend, which would be very inconvenient. So that's probably not going to work. And now I've forgotten the value for bend position I used. What was it, like 746? Nope. Was it 726? Is that what it was? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is probably how it's going to have to be. So with that in mind, I'm really leaning towards a unified body, or having one or two joints, one for the bell and one for the body. But we can decide that later, because we actually do have more work to do on creating the exterior of the instrument. Anyway, once again, I know we went long today, but I hope it was at least informative or interesting. I'm going to save that, and in the stream, I'm probably not going to do this at least until come back to this at least until Thursday. Anyway, I hope everyone has a good day. Those of you who actually stuck around to the end, as well as those of you watching the VOD, I'll come back to this later. See you later.